Let's begin with a simple yet transformative idea. Your brain is not fixed, it's changeable. And it responds powerfully to focused, consistent action, 1 hour, 60 minutes. That's all it takes each day to shift the trajectory of your life, not through wishful thinking, not through hacks or empty affirmations, but through the biology of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself in response to what you repeatedly do. Neuroplasticity is the brain's remarkable ability to adapt, rewire, and form new neural connections throughout life. This isn't just a theoretical concept, it's a biological reality grounded in decades of neuroscience research. When we say 1 hour a day can change your life, the foundation of that idea rests on the understanding that the brain physically and functionally changes in response to repeated, intentional effort. It doesn't matter where you start. Whether you're trying to learn a language, develop emotional resilience, or become better at public speaking, the process is the same neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you practice a skill, engage in focused thought, or intentionally reflect, you are strengthening synaptic connections in your brain that make that activity more natural, automatic, and efficient over time. This transformation is not passive. Neuroplasticity requires activation. It demands that you engage with effort, attention, and repetition. The brain doesn't rewire itself when you're distracted or multitasking. It changes in response to focused engagement, and this is where the concept of dedicating just 1 hour each day becomes powerful. 1 hour is a manageable, sustainable dose of structured effort. It's long enough to enter a state of deep focus, though what's known in neuroscience as top-down processing, where you override reflexive, autopilot behavior and engage higher order cognition. During this kind of work, the brain releases neuromodulators like acetylcholine and norepinephrine, which heighten attention and alertness and help tag synapses for growth. These chemicals say to your nervous system, this matters. Remember this, reinforce this. Think about how a musician learns an instrument. No one expects to play the violin fluently in a week. Instead, it's daily practice, structured, intentional, and challenging, that builds skill. This is not just a metaphor for life transformation. It is the process. Every behavior you want to adopt, every habit you want to form, every identity you wish to embody, whether that's becoming a disciplined learner, a calm communicator, or a resilient individual, relies on rewiring neural circuits. And those circuits respond to repetition far more than occasional intensity. Neuroplasticity follows a use it or lose it rule. Circuits that are activated repeatedly become more efficient. Those that are neglected wither away. This is why consistency matters far more than how long you practice on a single day. Daily exposure keeps circuits alive, flexible, and ready to grow stronger. Furthermore, intentional effort strengthens something else, metacognition. This is your brain's ability to think about its own thinking. When you commit to just 1 hour a day of focused activity, you're not just practicing a task, you're training your awareness of how you learn, how you feel under challenge, how you respond to discomfort. That layer of self-reflection builds emotional intelligence, adaptability, and clarity, all byproducts of neuroplasticity development. It's a feedback loop. The more you engage in effortful learning, the more your brain adapts, and the more adaptable your brain becomes for future learning. Importantly, neuroplasticity doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't require talent. What it demands is frequency and quality of attention. That's why even a single hour, if done daily, can create change that compounds over time. 1 hour may seem small in a world that glorifies hustle and overnight success. But from the brain's perspective, it's a powerful trigger. It's a deliberate message to the nervous system this pathway matters. Let's strengthen it. Let's make it automatic. Let's build identity around it. So when you carve out that one focused hour each day, know this, you are not just checking a box. You are engaging your biology to evolve one synapse, one connection, one day at a time. Now, here's the science. When you engage in deliberate, distraction-free effort, your brain releases acetylcholine, a neurochemical that acts like a spotlight, marking that activity as important. Repeated daily, this signals your brain. This matters. Strengthen these circuits. In today's world, distraction is the default. Notifications, background noise, and the constant pull of digital platforms fragment our attention into smaller and smaller units. But the human brain wasn't designed to operate in a scattered state. It thrives in periods of focused, sustained effort. When you dedicate even just 1 hour a day to uninterrupted, intentional work, you're giving your brain the ideal conditions to function at a high cognitive level. This kind of deep work does something extraordinary. It activates and strengthens your brain's executive networks, areas involved in decision making, memory consolidation, and attention regulation. Over time, This leads to enhanced cognitive efficiency, which simply means you can think more clearly, learn more quickly, and make better decisions with less mental fatigue. This focused state of mind engages what's known as task-positive networks, neural systems responsible for deep thinking analysis and problem solving. During an hour of undistracted time, your brain enters this optimal performance zone where it is far more efficient at encoding new information and integrating it with what you already know. This is when real learning happens. You're not just memorizing, you're building connections. You're not just working, you're training your brain to handle complexity. That's why elite performers across all fields, scientists, athletes, writers, carve out time daily for deep, uninterrupted work. The key isn't the number of hours, it's the quality of those hours. One intensely focused hour is far more valuable than several hours of fragmented multitask time. In this state, the brain also engages in what's called neurosynchronization. That means multiple regions of the brain begin to coordinate and fire in harmony to complete the task at hand. For example, when you write with intention, you're activating visual, motor, language, and memory systems all at once. When you practice a skill deliberately, you're strengthening the communication between sensory input and motor output. This synchronization is essential to mastery, and it doesn't occur during shallow work. It requires depth, challenge, and sustained effort, exactly the kind of environment you create when you block out 1 hour a day for focused engagement. Cognitive efficiency also increases over time through this process. Initially, deep work might feel tiring. That's because your brain is adjusting, building capacity, much like a muscle during exercise. But as this daily practice continues, you experience mental gains, faster recall, clearer reasoning, more creativity, and better task switching. You're literally training your frontal cortex to operate with greater precision and speed. And just like physical exercise, this mental conditioning has compounding effects. With time, what used to take an hour might take 40 minutes, freeing up more cognitive bandwidth for other areas of life. This is the neurological dividend of daily focus. An hour of intentional focus each day also promotes what's known as flow. Flow is the psychological zone where time dilates, effort feels fluid, and productivity spikes. But flow doesn't arise from chaos. It emerges from challenge balanced with skill, and it requires a period of uninterrupted attention to enter. By committing to 1 daily hour of deep work, you train your brain to reach this state faster and more often, and because flow enhances memory encoding, performance, and intrinsic motivation, it accelerates your learning curve exponentially. Finally, when you create a daily rhythm of focused time, you're also signaling to your nervous system that this effort matters. This consistent structure enhances predictability and reduces cognitive friction, the resistance many people feel when starting a difficult task. Over time, your brain begins to anticipate and prepare for this period of focused work. It becomes easier to start, easier to sustain, and more rewarding to complete. You move from a reactive mind to a deliberate one. In just 1 focused hour a day, you're not only building skill, you're building a brain that learns faster, thinks better, and performs stronger in everything you do. But here's the critical part: you must do it daily. Not occasionally, not when you feel inspired, but like brushing your teeth, non-negotiable. Why? Because the brain doesn't change through intensity, it changes through consistency. Every day you show up, you're reinforcing not just knowledge or skill, but identity. You're teaching your nervous system, I am someone who invests in myself. Consistency is one of the most underrated drivers of transformation, especially when compared to intensity. In a culture that glorifies extremes, burnout work schedules, crash diets, and high adrenaline productivity, it's easy to believe that lasting change must come from doing a lot all at once. But the brain and body don't operate on that logic. Real, sustainable growth is built on frequency, not force. When you show up every day for just 1 hour, you're building a structure your nervous system can trust. It's predictable. It's repeatable. And that's exactly what the biology of habit formation requires. From a neurobiological perspective, the repetition of daily action triggers the brain's reward and learning systems far more effectively than sporadic, intense efforts. Imagine someone studying for 8 hours in 1 day and then doing nothing for the rest of the week. That intensity may feel productive in the moment, but the brain doesn't retain information or strengthen circuits as effectively from single high-load efforts. It prefers distributed practice, repeated exposure over time. Why? Because repeated exposure encourages long-term potentiation, a process by which synapses strengthen and stabilize, making learning more durable and retrievable. This means that 1 hour a day is more powerful than 7 hours once a week, because you're giving your brain a chance to build, rest, and reinforce without overloading it. Psychologically, consistency also shifts identity. Every day you commit to that hour, you're reinforcing a self-perception. I'm someone who shows up. This identity-based motivation becomes self-reinforcing over time. You begin to rely less on external push and more on internal pull, because the act of showing up becomes part of who you are, not just what you do. And here's something fascinating about the brain. It seeks to resolve the gap between your actions and your self-image. So if your behavior reflects consistency, your mind begins to shape a story around it. You don't just exercise, you become someone who values physical health. You don't just write, you become a writer. That shift doesn't come from working 10 hours in a single day. It comes from showing up 1 hour every day without exception. Even when motivation fades, consistency keeps momentum alive. This is critical because motivation is not a reliable state. It fluctuates based on energy levels, stress, mood, and countless external variables. But consistent action is governed by systems, not feelings. And systems can operate even when emotions are low. This is why successful people across disciplines rely on structure. They don't wait to feel inspired, they commit to a schedule. That 1 hour window becomes a non-negotiable. Over time, the friction of starting decreases, and the routine becomes automated through habit loops: cue, routine, reward. Eventually, the behavior becomes neurologically encoded and requires less cognitive effort to initiate. What once felt like a chore becomes second nature. There's also an important physiological benefit to consistent timing hormonal alignment. When you engage in focused, routine activity at the same time each day, you synchronize your effort with your circadian biology. This means neurotransmitters like cortisol, dopamine, and serotonin become predictably associated with that period of productivity. The body begins to expect it. This anticipation creates a biochemical readiness, more alertness, better attention, and increased capacity for learning. In contrast, erratic bursts of effort at unpredictable times don't give the nervous system a stable rhythm to adapt to. Consistency aligns both mind and body into a synergistic loop, optimizing both performance and recovery. Ultimately, consistency outpaces intensity because the brain thrives on rhythm. It doesn't need explosions of effort. It needs daily signals. That's why 1 hour a day practiced over weeks and months can lead to profound change. Not because you're pushing harder, but because you're showing up smarter through this steady, repeatable discipline. You're constructing a life that's not only more productive, but neurologically sustainable. You're not just creating results, you're becoming the kind of person who naturally produces them. And there's another biological lever, dopamine. When you complete that hour, you experience a surge in reward circuitry. This not only feels good, it motivates you to return. It makes the habit self-reinforcing. Dopamine is one of the most misunderstood yet powerful neuromodulators in the human brain. It is not merely the pleasure chemical, as it's often described. Rather, it's deeply involved in motivation, learning, and goal-directed behavior. Understanding how dopamine works gives us insight into why dedicating one focused hour a day to any meaningful pursuit can initiate and sustain profound personal change. When you engage in a task that has a clear objective, such as reading a book, mastering a new skill, or working on a project, your brain begins to associate that effort with progress. Progress, no matter how small, triggers a release of dopamine, creating a sense of internal reward. That reward doesn't just make you feel good in the moment. It teaches your brain that this behavior is worth repeating. This is how habit loops are built. There's a cue, the start of your 1 hour session. There's the routine, the focused effort. And then there's the reward, the dopamine-driven satisfaction of completion or improvement. Over time, the brain begins to anticipate the dopamine release even before the task begins. This phenomenon is known as dopamine preloading, and it's critical for building intrinsic motivation. The anticipation of a positive outcome becomes a source of drive in itself. You don't just wait to feel motivated. You start to act because your brain expects the reward. This creates a self-sustaining cycle where motivation is no longer external, but arises from within the neural chemistry of your own actions. The beauty of this system is that it doesn't require massive success to activate. Dopamine is sensitive to relative progress, not just big milestones. That means checking off a small task, noticing improvement in a skill, or simply completing your daily hour of effort is enough to activate the reward system. What's more, this system is trainable. The more consistently you engage in this cycle of action and reward, the more responsive your dopamine circuits become. Your brain begins to associate productivity, growth, and learning with genuine satisfaction, not frustration or exhaustion. This is a critical shift. It means the more you stick to your daily hour, the easier it becomes to return to it, because the brain starts to look forward to it. There's also a valuable relationship between dopamine and focus. Dopamine enhances the signal-to-noise ratio in your brain's neural networks. In simpler terms, it helps you stay locked in on what matters and tune out distractions. This means that even if your day is chaotic or filled with demands, that 1 hour of focused work becomes a neurological safe zone where attention is sharper and the mind is aligned. The more frequently you enter this zone, the stronger the association becomes. Your brain learns, this is the time we go deep. This is the time we grow. Additionally, this dopamine cycle contributes to resilience. When you train your brain to find reward in effort, not just in outcomes, you develop what psychologists call a growth mindset. You begin to value the process rather than obsess over results. This makes it easier to stay consistent even when progress feels slow or when setbacks occur, because the real reward isn't somewhere far off in the future. It's embedded in the act of showing up, engaging, and completing your daily commitment. Over time, this changes how you relate to challenges. Tasks that once felt daunting now feel energizing. You don't avoid difficulty, you're drawn to it because you've wired your brain to associate effort with satisfaction. Lastly, this practice teaches discipline with joy. Many people assume discipline must feel rigid or punishing, but when it's reinforced by dopamine, discipline becomes something else entirely. It becomes energizing. That daily hour no longer feels like something you have to do. It becomes something you want to do. Your brain, quite literally, begins to crave the experience of growth, focus, and self-directed progress. That is the power of understanding and using your dopamine system wisely. By aligning 1 hour a day with your brain's natural reward pathways, you don't just change your habits, you reshape your entire internal motivational landscape. The process of becoming skilled, whether in academics, business, art, or personal development, is not a mystery. It's a biological and psychological system governed by how the brain encodes and retrieves information over time. One of the most effective ways to develop any skill is through deliberate practice, and this is where the idea of one focused hour a day becomes powerful. Skill acquisition doesn't depend solely on how much time you put in. It depends on the quality of that time and how your nervous system is engaged during it. In neuroscience, this quality time is called deep learning time, when you are fully attentive, emotionally engaged, and cognitively challenged. During these moments, neural circuits are being activated, refined, and reinforced in real time. What's important to understand is that your brain requires repetition and feedback to master anything, but not just repetition in a mindless sense, repetition that is structured and intentional. When you spend 1 hour a day deeply focused on a specific skill or area of growth, you are giving your brain the precise environment it needs to form high-resolution internal models of that skill. For instance, if you're learning to speak a new language, that daily hour allows your brain to build and refine phonetic and grammatical maps. If you're practicing drawing, your visual motor circuits begin to align, making each movement more precise. Every day you return to that hour, your brain fine-tunes its internal blueprint, getting more efficient and accurate over time. This process is known as experience-dependent plasticity. Your brain literally changes in response to how and what you practice. What's more, research shows that spaced repetition, revisiting material or skills across multiple days, is far more effective than massed practice. This means that distributing your learning into short, daily sessions leads to better long-term retention and deeper understanding than cramming. 1 hour every day leverages this exact principle. It breaks learning into manageable, digestible segments that compound over time. With consistency, neural connections become more stable, and what once required conscious effort begins to feel automatic. In addition to encoding skills, this daily hour of focused practice builds error recognition and correction mechanisms in the brain. One of the hallmarks of expertise is not just doing something well, but quickly identifying when something is off and knowing how to correct it. During focused practice, especially when you're stretching just beyond your comfort zone, your brain becomes more sensitive to subtle differences in performance. This creates a feedback loop, try, adjust, try again, that rapidly accelerates learning. Over weeks and months, you not only build skills, but also intuition. You no longer just follow rules. You begin to feel and predict patterns. That's the mark of mastery. There is also a powerful emotional transformation that happens during skill development. When you consistently show up for your hour of focused work, especially in areas where you're still learning, you build tolerance for discomfort. You learn to face the frustration of failure, the uncertainty of not knowing, and the boredom of repetition, all without quitting. That emotional resilience is a skill in itself. It generalizes across life. The same ability that helps you stick with learning an instrument will help you navigate career challenges, relationships, and personal goals. It becomes a foundational character trait, discipline under pressure. Furthermore, the habit of focused practice develops what cognitive scientists call procedural memory, the kind of memory that allows you to perform tasks without consciously thinking about every step. Athletes rely on this. Musicians live by it. Public speakers, surgeons, and designers all build procedural fluency through repetition and refinement. 1 hour a day of well-designed, structured effort builds this kind of fluency faster than most people expect because you're not just working, you're embedding patterns into your nervous system. Over time, those patterns become permanent features of your performance. Ultimately, the commitment to practicing one skill for just an hour a day transforms you from a passive consumer into an active creator. You stop waiting for improvement and start manufacturing it. You realize that talent is not fixed, it's trained. Every minute you invest is part of a cumulative structure that rewires your brain, strengthens your capacity, and refines your character. What starts as an hour a day becomes a lifetime of progress. One of the most profound effects of dedicating 1 hour a day to intentional growth is the psychological shift it creates in your identity. This isn't just about completing tasks or checking boxes, it's about reshaping how you see yourself at a deep neurological level. Every time you sit down with purpose, free from distraction, and engage in meaningful effort, you're not just training your brain, you're sending a powerful signal to your subconscious. I am the kind of person who shows up for my goals. Over time, this daily act of discipline begins to rewire your self-image. You start to see yourself not as someone who struggles with inconsistency, but as someone who is reliable, driven, and capable of achieving what you set out to do. This internal identity shift becomes a silent but transformative force in everything you pursue. The brain, specifically the prefrontal cortex, is constantly taking in behavioral data to form your self-concept. It doesn't build identity from what you say, it builds identity from what you do repeatedly. So when you commit to a daily 1 hour ritual of deep focus and follow through, your actions reinforce a narrative. I am a learner. I am someone who improves, or I am committed to excellence. This is critically important because your actions and self-beliefs form a feedback loop. When you believe in your capacity to grow, you take more risks, set higher standards, and become more resilient in the face of setbacks. And each time you act in accordance with this belief, the identity becomes stronger. Eventually, your daily effort is no longer powered by willpower alone, it's powered by alignment with who you believe you are. This identity-based approach to growth is far more sustainable than motivation alone. Motivation is emotional and fleeting. It comes and goes with mood, energy, and external circumstances. Identity, on the other hand, is stable. When your behaviors are driven by who you believe you are, consistency becomes easier because it's no longer a battle of, should I do this today? It becomes a natural extension of your self-concept. For example, a person who identifies as an athlete doesn't ask if they'll train today, they just train. A person who sees themselves as a writer doesn't debate whether to write, they show up because it's who they are. That's the kind of psychological momentum you build when you commit to 1 hour a day of focused, purposeful action. Over time, this process also reduces self-doubt. Many people are paralyzed by the fear of failure, not because they're incapable, because they don't yet have enough evidence to believe in their own consistency. Daily action provides that evidence. It gives your brain a backlog of proof. Look what I've done. Look how far I've come. That track record builds confidence, not the inflated surface level kind, but the grounded, earned confidence that comes from doing hard things regularly. And with that kind of confidence, new challenges become less intimidating. You're no longer questioning your ability, you're building on it. Additionally, this repeated daily effort taps into a principle called self-referencing. When you engage in activities that reflect your values and goals, your brain encodes the experience more deeply because it matters to your identity. So that 1 hour isn't just productive, it's psychologically meaningful. It's reinforcing your purpose and increasing neural retention because your brain is tagging the information and experience as important to your personal story. This kind of encoding leads to more durable learning and longer lasting change. Ultimately, what begins as an external action becomes an internal transformation. You go from someone who tries to someone who is, from someone who hopes for change to someone who enacts it daily. That's the quiet power of 1 hour a day. It changes how you show up in the world by first changing how you see yourself. The shift may be subtle at first, but over weeks and months, it becomes undeniable. Your environment may stay the same. Your job title may not change right away. But inside, your identity evolves. And once that happens, the external changes inevitably follow. So the question isn't whether 1 hour can change your life. The real question is, what will you do with yours today